Hi, I'm Sahil,
I'm Rohan.
I'm Ruby. I'm Monica Salami.
and today we're going to be talking about the fight against 9/11.
Okay, I'm going to be answering the question that's on everyone's mind. Why did 9/11 even occur? 9/11 occurred based on the rocky relationship between America and the Middle East. Al-Qaeda and many other terrorist groups retaliated against America because of its support towards Israel and its involvement in the Persian Gulf War and its continued military presence in their area.
So now we'll be talking about the direct effects of 9/11 on the U.S. economy. So this graph made by Brian Roberts, who was a senior economist at the Department of Homeland Security. He created this graph to show the gross domestic product, which is a measure of the country's wealth. And if you see here, on September 11th, the value of the GDP dropped by nearly half of its value, showing that already the U.S. was already having a bad year, and 9/11 made it even worse. In this next graph by him, we can see the unemployment rate during that same time period. So before 9/11, it was around 5%, and then it jumped around 6%. That's a 1% increase in the unemployment rate. That 1% represents 2.85 million people who lost their jobs. So this shows that 9/11 affected the entire country, and millions of people lost their jobs because of it.
So, symptoms for respiratory diseases arose after the attack and cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases among women over 65 years. Residents that reported having lower respiratory systems recall having a layer of dust in their homes after the World Trade Center collapse. The 9/11 terrorist attack caused many lives of danger for physical harm. Not only did it cause physical harm, but mentally affect lives as well. A study of low-income students showed that those who lost a loved one on 9/11 were twice as likely to experience anxiety, depression, or PTSD. This group was more likely to experience functional impairment and loss of employment. Individuals that also knew someone involved in rescue were twice as likely to have an anxiety disorder. This graph from Cambridge University Press displays the detrimental effects that 9/11 responders possessed from 2011 to 2021. Even now, nearly 20 years later, cancer, lung disease, heart disease, and post-traumatic stress disorder appear to be on the rise among 9/11 responders. More than 21% of residents in the World Trade Center Health Registry reported new PTSD symptoms 5 to 6 years after 9/11. Even as this event occurred many years ago, the traumatic nature of it continues to have a significant impact on individuals.
Jeff Price, the Assistant Security Director at Denver International Airport, stated that before 9/11, security was invisible and was really implemented to be seen that way. But after 9/11, America needed to make their security better. Therefore, President Bush sent over $20 billion to Homeland Security, which Sahil will talk more about, and implemented tough new airline security systems. TSA, the Aviation and Transportation Security Act, was implemented and also required 100% of luggages to be screened by X-rays. As shown by this picture right here, luggages would be screened by X-rays and it would show if there's any weapons inside the luggages. Also, many other acts were passed. The Federal Air Marshal was expanded, and also airlines were required to have cockpit doors to prevent any attackers from entering. This shows how America is combating terrorism heads-on.
So next we're going to be looking at 9/11's impact on American politics. So on top of the Twin Towers, as we all know, was attacked on 9/11, the Pentagon was also attacked on 9/11. The Pentagon served as one of the U.S.'s major military bases, and attacking it made the country as vulnerable as possible. So the government needed to respond to these attacks, and roughly a year after 9/11, they created the Department of Homeland Security, also referred to as DHS. So DHS basically served as a security framework to prevent and recover from future terrorist attacks. And it had an aviation branch and a cybersecurity branch so that we could assure that these attacks would never repeat again. So as we can see from this graph here, after 2001, the year in which 9/11 occurred, the amount of anti-Muslim assaults drastically spiked. The American population began to scapegoat Muslims for the attacks on 9/11. However, President George W. Bush, who was the president at the time of the attacks, reassured all of the Americans that they would remain together and reunited through these tough times, and that we wouldn't we wouldn't scapegoat the Muslims for the attacks.
Okay. After 9/11, many Americans sought to combat terrorism by taking military action abroad. From there, President Bush called for the War of Terror, which was the war against terrorism. We had a lot of achievements from this war, such as using $145 billion for rebuilding Afghanistan and destroying Al-Qaeda terrorist groups and training camps. As this graph shows, because of our active involvement inside Afghanistan, the amount of people believing that terrorism is a big problem decreased. However, we recently withdrawn from this war after in 2020. Therefore, 89% of Americans believe that the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan threatens our national security. This promotes a problem. The problem is, how can America prevent another 9/11? We have two solutions to do this. One solution is international peace, and how we're going to do this is do nothing. As stated before, 9/11 occurred based on our America's involvement in the Middle East. Doing something like sending in troops might cause another war or another 9/11 happening. To not repeat the same mistakes, America should not get involved in unnecessary conflict. Also, America is dealing with a lot of diplomatic problems, such as inflation and gun violence. Also, international problems with China and America. America should not get involved in this to not be back in point A.
So some pros and cons of the solution that Faber just mentioned. So the pros include that we would have a better relationship with the Middle East and therefore prevent any terrorist attacks. And also it's a lot more convenient for us. And then the cons include that we would erase a lot of our achievements from the 20 years war.
So another solution is educating others. We as a group decided to establish 9/11 Education Week in schools. During this week, schools can play 9/11 informational videos to promote awareness for students. History classes can teach about 9/11 and its outcomes. This can allow for students to know warning signs of terrorism, and children can understand the importance of kindness and helping others.
So now we'll be looking at the pros and cons. So this method will help us promote kindness and spread awareness about 9/11, and it will give appreciation to our officers and firefighters who lost their lives that day. And it will also prepare everyone for a situation like this by preparing them for like mental issues like PTSD and depression. And for the cons, it might inflict good school curriculums, and some schools may not be comfortable teaching the curriculum, and parents may not want their students learning about such a sensitive topic. And state legislation may not be wanting to have time for a 9/11 week.
So now we've combined both of our solutions to present you guys with the perfect solution. So the perfect solution is basically to keep international peace, but also educate Americans about 9/11. So we would do this by teaching the younger generation about what caused 9/11 and how we can prevent and recover from these attacks. And we would give teachers the flexibility to create their own lessons so that they could educate the new generation.
Okay, as you can see, there are many pros. There's more pros than cons to the solution. The pros are preventing another 9/11, preventing a war, spreading kindness to kids, and promoting awareness, and helping them remember and appreciate the people who lost their lives that day. The cons are state legislation may not approve of the week. Parents may not be comfortable with their children learning about such a sensitive topic, and Americans may be feeling insecure by doing nothing. Overall, this is a perfect solution to combat terrorism internationally and domestically. Thank you for listening to our project.
So we're going to ask each of you a question. Sahil, how did your group address source credibility when finding additional information for your group solution or resolution?
So for our solution, we primarily focused on government websites because the political impact of it. So a lot of the government websites had proper information on 9/11 itself and how the country recovered from it, and we could use those government websites to create our own solution.
Okay. Purvi, if you had another team member, what other lens or perspective could they have researched that would have made a useful contribution to the project?
So I think an environmental lens would be a useful contribution, because while I was researching, I saw the 9/11 attack had many dust clouds. It caused many dust clouds and a lot of air pollution, which is something we could look more in depth at.
Okay. Favor. Whose report in your group do you feel was the most contradictory to your findings?
Okay, so I gotta say, okay, first, it was both Rohan and Corby, kind of because, as you can see, my lens was talking about how America improved and how America got back on its feet after 9/11. However, Corby and Rohan was talking about how America, like, kind of, like, was affected, like, a lot by 9/11 and how, like, the stagnicity of America, like how Corey was talking about how like there's a lot of cardiovascular diseases inside women and how that prolonged for a long time. And Rohan was talking about the unemployment was growing. By sharing that, it shows like how America was stagnant during that time. But my like lens was showing how America got back on its feet and what's its future for.
Okay. And Rohan, how did the group decide to include Favor's perspective, lens, or conclusion into the overall presentation?
As Favor said, she was mainly looking into a futuristic lens and a little bit into the historic. So we got an idea of how 9/11 started, so like what caused it, and we also got to know what the U.S. did to recover from 9/11. So that gave us an idea of what worked and what didn't work. So for example, Favor talked about us entering the war on terror. And that technically didn't stop all terrorist attacks in the U.S., but it did help a bit. So that and other ideas we incorporated from our other group members led us to our solution.
Okay. Thank you.